Welcome that you've joined today. Let me introduce today's speakers. There we already see one of them. So our speakers today are Brian Cimbolic. He is Vice President and General Counsel of Public Interest Registry, PIR, the registry for .org. And with us today, we also have Theo Geurts. He is Certified Information Privacy Professional and Governing Risk and Compliance Manager at Realtime Register. Just for the housekeeping today, this webinar, of course, is being recorded. The recording will be available after the meeting. You are muted throughout the webinar. Of course, feel free to ask questions anytime. There is a question spot where you can put in your questions and I will monitor them. But of course, you can also raise your questions verbally by using the raising your hand button. We will unmute you, and as soon as you are unmuted, it would be nice if you state your name and your affiliation. And of course, then we are happy to answer your questions and also discuss them. After the webinar, you will receive a survey of the webinar, and this is always a very good opportunity to provide feedback so that we can always improve our offerings. If you're asking yourself, and if you're not very familiar with topDNS so far, so you can find all the information about topDNS on our website, topdns.eco. And you can also see here the supporters of the topDNS initiative to fight DNS abuse. And shortly, you will see further additions to this group of supporters. And as you can see, there's always a free spot available if you want to join. And if you're interested to join, there is also a steering committee that you can be part of. And this is the current group of steering committee members. So also Theo and Brian are members of the steering committee. And we are very happy to have them on the team. And if you would like to be part of this group, please feel free to reach out. As already mentioned, this is part one of the webinar series. So the next webinars we have already scheduled. So the second one in this series will take place on the 13th of July, where Jeff Betzer from CleanDNS will explain about standards and frameworks for evidence abuse online. And on the 21st of August, we will see Theo again, where he will show how to investigate online abuse with free tools. If you want to keep track of things and want to participate in these webinars, check our website where you can see them on the events calendar, or if you want to get everything right directly to your mailbox, feel free to subscribe to our newsletters. And with this, I would like to hand over to our first speaker today, which is Brian, and Brian will show how PIR is working with QPI on reducing abuse online. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lars. Would you guys mind showing my slides, please? And while they do so, hello, everyone. As Lars mentioned, I'm Brian Cimbolic. I'm Vice President and General Counsel at Public Interest Registry. We're the registry operator for .org. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to run you through a little bit about PIR and our anti-abuse practice. Part of my job responsibilities is overseeing our anti-abuse program. I'll talk to you mostly about QPI, or the Quality Performance Index, what its goals are, does it work, and how does it help combat DNS abuse. Finally, a sort of call to arms for open sourcing to have other registries and potentially wholesale registrars to adopt system incentive programs like QPI to try and make the internet a better place. Next slide, please. So a little bit about PIR. PIR is a nonprofit registry operator of .org. We also have what we call the .org family of domains that have sort of a mission-driven flavor, such as .charity, .foundation, .ngo, .ong, Gives and Giving. So we are a supporting organization of the Internet Society. So when 60 cents of every dollar that comes into PIR ultimately goes through and helps fund ISOC and the incredible work that it does around the world. But while we're very proud to help ISOC and everything that it does, we also have our own nonprofit mission. And part of that is to help empower nonprofits and develop practices that really serve to improve the state of the DNS. And so that's one of the ways. Next slide, please. One of the ways that we do that is through our work in our anti-abuse practice. So we've published in 2019 something that we call our anti-abuse principles. And so there's several sort of bedrock principles that we stand to live by in our abuse processes, including a requirement for transparency. So once a month, we publish all anti-abuse statistics to include domains we act on for DNS abuse, for website content abuse, as well as transparency reporting in court orders and requests from law enforcement. We also have a commitment for due process in that we publish an anti-abuse appeals process where registrants can, in the event we get something wrong, seek to challenge the decisions that we make under our appeals process. But we try and be very active in industry initiatives. And so we're just one of many actors in this space that are doing really good work. Registries and registrars, especially in the last few years, have put in a lot of effort as an industry to try and elevate the state of the DNS and to reduce DNS abuse. And some of those initiatives that we participate in include the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, where I serve as coordinator of the domains program. We're also very proud, as Lars pointed out, to be on the steering committee for topDNS. topDNS is doing excellent work, bringing in not just registries and registrars, but also hosting providers to take a more sort of comprehensive view of DNS abuse and the different parties that it touches. We also helped develop the framework to address abuse, but really our flagship DNS abuse initiative is the creation of the DNS Abuse Institute. So Graham Bunton and Rowena Shue work for the DNS Abuse Institute, where we develop practices in org and are proud of what we do, but the Institute is really meant to take that 30,000-foot view and help improve practices, not just for our own TLDs, but for the entirety of the DNS. Next slide, please. But our anti-abuse program, really you can think of, I think of at least, as having two parts. First is the reactive part, and that's what I think many of us would think of when you think of an anti-abuse program. And that's we work with our provider, Clean DNS, and so once DNS abuse is identified, we work with our registrar partners or directly suspend the domain names ourselves. And we really enjoy working with Clean DNS. I see some Clean DNSs on the call, especially because there's a focus on evidence-based reporting. And so that makes the referrals that we pass downstream much more actionable for a registrar. If I were to send something to Theo, I then send a screenshot along with it to show that, yes, the domain is engaged in abuse. We also have trusted notifier programs in place with the US Food and Drug Administration to identify domains distributing opioids or websites attendant to domains distributing opioids or narcotics online, as well as the Internet Watch Foundation for child sexual abuse material. But that's on the reactive side. On the proactive side, if we can go to the next slide, please, is QPI. And so what is QPI? The Quality Performance Index is ultimately, it's a registrar incentive program. And so what we do is we look at a registrar's registration patterns in org and the other TLDs and essentially assign a scorecard for each registrar based on their health patterns in .org. While it is an incentive program, we're cognizant that it's not deep discounting. We don't want to have an incentive program that inadvertently increases DNS abuse by having, effectively disposable domains. So we're cognizant of not having discounting too deeply with QPI. But what QPI really does, the effect that we've had it seen is that to use an idiom, it's both a carrot and a stick. So registrars that have healthy abuse patterns receive varying levels of incentives. So if they have low abuse, high renewal rates, they're going to receive a slightly higher discount than someone with slightly not as good rates. But there's also the possibility that a registrar just doesn't qualify at all. And if a registrar doesn't qualify for QPI, that's sort of the stick. They know that they are at a competitive disadvantage to their the competitor registrars that have healthier abuse or have healthier registration patterns and lower abuse. Really, at its core, though, QPI has two goals, and that's to reduce DNS abuse and to create responsible growth in our TLDs. Next slide, please. So QPI came about in 2019 when we really sort of took a comprehensive look at our abuse practices and sort of sat back and almost did a self-audit. Are we thinking about this the right way? Are we trying to solve problems correctly? And so one of the ways that we did that was through recognizing the effect that incentives had and wanted to try and be smarter about how we incentivize registrar behavior. So real credit to SIDN, the CCTLD registry operator for .NL. They have something called the Registrar Scorecard that they were very generous with their time and helped us really help brainstorm what QPI could look like for .org. And so special thanks to SIDN. They continue to lead in this field. Their Registrar Scorecard continues to impress and is a real inspiration for QPI and how we developed it. So ever since launching QPI, this has been our only channel-wide discount program for .org, trying to be, again, trying to make sure we're incentivizing the right behavior. But we also, in 2019, instituted something we call abuse sweeps, where the program, we weren't using clean DNS at the time. The program that we used for abuse management was very good at catching domains as they were registered. But if a domain aged and only then started engaging in abuse, domains would slip through the cracks. So we, at the same time that we instituted QPI, we also instituted these abuse sweeps to try and get what we've been missing. Next slide. So QPI is comprised of 6 metrics. There's 3 primary metrics and 3 secondary metrics. The first is abuse rates with a little asterisk that we'll come back to. Renewal rates, domain usage. So these are weighted at a higher level than the secondary criteria of SSL certificates, DNSSEC, and average term length. Next slide, please. The reason that abuse rates was had an asterisk on it, if we could move to the slide titled abuse rates, please. I'll keep talking, but if we could pull up the abuse rate slide, please. Which is, there we go. So it's because that is a gating factor. So it doesn't matter. So of the 6 criteria, a registrar could have a perfect score in all of the other criteria. But if they don't have a satisfactory abuse rate, meaning if their abuse is too high, they do not pass QPI and will receive no discounts from PIR. So it's the only one of the 6 factors that if you don't pass that, you're just completely ineligible to participate in QPI. We keep that specific metric internals to prevent gaming. It's just we want registrars to have less abuse, so we don't want them to work to a specific number. We want less abuse, and if they pass, then they're eligible. If they don't, they can't get a discount from us. Next slide, please. So goal 1 that I talked about, reducing DNS abuse. Is it working? To us, the answer is yes. So these are our abuse levels compared to 2019. 2019 was the last year we didn't have a full year of QPI under our belt, and immediately, year over year, we saw a 67% reduction in DNS abuse. That continued. So 2021 compared to 2019, a 71% reduction, and then last year compared to 2019, a 75.6% reduction in DNS abuse levels. So DNS abuse absolutely has gone down ever since we launched QPI. Now these are our internal metrics, what we observed for DNS abuse, but we also sort of corroborate that with external sources as well. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Spam House, which does a lot of things. They maintain reputation block lists. They also create something called a badness score. So they look at all the bad domains that they recognize in various TLDs. And in that same time period, in 2019, org averaged 3.12% bad domains, and that's down to 0.9% in May of 2023. So basically, they are seeing the same thing we are. It's not just our internal data. It seems as though there really has been effectively a 75% reduction, at least in DNS abuse in org ever since we launched QPI. Next slide, please. I want to note, many of you are aware there's proposed contractual amendments with gTLD registries and registrars with ICANN. For the first time, there's going to be a real obligation to, quote, do something about DNS abuse. So QPI is a program that we really think makes sense, especially in that landscape. There's a cost for each abuse referral that comes in. there is, it's whether it's someone on my team's time, someone on the registrar's side, the back and forth in between, each of those interactions is a cost. And so if you have a system that makes abuse less likely to occur on the front end, like QPI, then it's less cost incurred to clean that up on the back end. And while that cost may have been a sort of option for those that want to act and responsibly, that's now going to be contractually required. So it's something that I really encourage registries and registrars to think about, is implementing some proactive system like QPI moving forward. Next slide. So goal 2, create responsible growth. So currently more than 55% of all org registrations are created through QPI. And since we've implemented it, we've seen a 6.3% increase in renewal rates, which is pretty significant. So between 2015 and 2019, we enjoyed a 75.5% renewal rate, which is pretty good for a GTLD. But ever since implementing QPI, focusing on responsible growth and not just growth for the sake of it without quality registrations, that number is closer to 82%. Next slide, please. But it hasn't just been beneficial for us, the registry, it's also been very beneficial for our registrar partners. Registrars that participate in QPI enjoy 16% higher renewals than non-participants. And we've seen registrars really approach us about increasing their discount or improving their practices in order to participate in QPI. So our channel team will regularly sit down with the registrars, show them their data, talk about areas for improvements, and really help them improve their QPI score, because doing so, it's good for their business, it's good for our business, and it's good for the quality of the registrations that we're incentivizing. Finally, we also encourage now consultation with the DNS Abuse Institute. One of their sort of flagship initiatives is called DNSAI Compass, which is a measurement tool for DNS. So if you haven't, I'll drop a link after I'm done chatting here. But I'd encourage you to reach out if you're a registry or registrar. If you haven't seen your data, Graham and Rowena at the DNS Abuse Institute have some really interesting data as far as where abuse is concentrated, and you kind of get comparisons relative to your peers. So we're encouraging registrars that have questions about their QPI score to also talk with the DNS Abuse Institute. Next slide, please. So that, registrars coming to talk to us, here's a real world example. This is a real registrar, but we're keeping the name of it anonymous for this. That in 2019, this is a mid to large size registrar. In 2019, this green line here on the screen is their abuse per create rate. So basically, how much abuse do they see compared to their creates in org. The blue line is their just overall growth and registrations in org. So in 2019, this particular registrar was failing QPI. And they were failing, as you can see, because they had pretty high abuse spikes, at one point hitting about 6% of their registrations in org were attributable to DNS abuse. We sat down to them, showed them their data, and explained why they didn't qualify for QPI. And I don't know if it was a direct result of that conversation, but sometime shortly thereafter, they fundamentally changed the way they sold org, or at least they changed the way that abuse was occurring, because as you can see, it sank like a stone. And by the end of 2000, or at the beginning of 2020, and ever since, this registrar, after that conversation, has held an abuse per create right around 0% in org, when they were previously at 6%. And at the same time, their growth continued because they're enjoying discounts in org. So it really is, it has been nothing but a win-win. So this registrar, like this graph to me shows what can QPI do. It can help you grow, but it can also really make your abuse at a per registrar in a TLD level sink like a stone. Next slide, please. So I have a couple testimonials. The most important testimonial, though, is Theo, that's going to speak to QPI and what he does with it in a few minutes. But I did just want to point out, so James Bladel from GoDaddy pointed out that QPI helps demonstrate that tackling DNS abuse results not only in a safer namespace, but it's good for business. And I think that really sort of hits the nail on the head. We can all wear the white hat and try and sort of crack down on DNS abuse. or we can all sort of try and be good at business, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. We think that this kind of program really helps tie those two goals together, that you can have a program that responsibly incentivizes growth, at the same time makes it unlikely that the registrations that come in are abusive. Next slide, please. A couple more quotes. So Ashley from name.com notes that QPI helps with the focus on long-term success over short-term volume. It's led to an increase in org revenue. So again, good for business. And McKaylee, who everyone knows and loves from Black Knight, points out that it's nice to be recognized that basically I'm already doing good stuff. And so QPI, McKaylee, for example, hasn't had to change anything he does. All he does now is get a financial reward for having healthy registration patterns. So, and we're happy with that. If a registrar is doing great, they don't want to change anything, that's great. Here's a discount. We're glad that you're performing the way you are in org. Next slide, please. So the QPI has been called a registry best practice by ICANN's GAC, the Government Advisory Committee's Public Safety Working Group. Likewise, in the European Commission study on DNS abuse, org was recognized as a positive registry practice. And I will also note that it's pretty consistent, QPI is consistent with the ICANN CCTRT, which is a mouthful, Consumer Choice Review Team recommendations around incentive programs. Next slide, please. So what's next for QPI? We're always sort of looking at QPI and thinking about, is it doing what we want it to? Is it achieving our goals? So it is continuing to reduce DNS abuse and create responsible growth. But we're always sort of thinking about, are we measuring the right things? Do we have the right balance in our recipe? So we may tweak things here and there moving forward, but ultimately the foundation for QPI has been laid. But most importantly, and I encourage anyone that has thoughts on this call or send it to me offline or raise a question here, is this, what would you do different? We're very proud of QPI, but we try not to be prideful in how we approach it. So any idea is a good idea here. If there's room for improvement, please let us know. If you think we're not measuring the right thing, if there's other measurements you think we should factor in, we're all ears. And especially our registrar channel, we always try and get a sense from them. Is this encouraging the right behavior? Is this burdensome? Is it helpful? So again, all ears on feedback for QPI. Next slide, please. So again, we're inviting others to participate in QPI. So we think that it works, help reduce DNS abuse and create responsible growth. And we think the DNS would benefit if other registries implemented systems like QPI. We intentionally made this non-proprietary. We didn't try and protect it in any way because we think other registries doing this, it would be good for their business, yes, but it would also improve the state of the DNS by making DNS abuse less likely to occur. Next slide. So I'll pause there, and while I know Theo is going to be going, I just want to say thank you very much to topDNS for having me present here. I really do think that QPI can be something that benefits the DNS, and if other registries were to adopt a system like QPI, you don't need to call it QPI, you don't need to attribute anything to us, do your own thing. But the thought here is that registry incentive programs can really have a marked effect on DNS abuse levels. So the thought behind QPI is being intentional and deliberate and trying to increase the quality of registrations, not just the quantity. So with that, maybe I'll hand things to Lars, to Theo, unless I'll take questions here, or maybe we save them to the end. Lars, I didn't know if you had a preference for how we handle that.
So first of all, Brian, thank you very much. Very great presentation, very interesting. I think it's always very appealing when fighting abuse and also including DNS abuse can be a business opportunity because this makes the implementation much easier. What I've put into the chat is the dates for the next two webinars, because thank you, Andreas, from the audience. I had a typo on one of my slides, so the third webinar will take place on the 10th of August and not on the 23rd of August. So I put the links into the chat so that you can register directly. I've also put into the chat the link to topDNS and also to the DNS Abuse Institute's Compass project, so that you can also take a look at this one. And with this, I don't see any questions in the questions pod, and I currently also don't see any hands raised. So if there are no questions right here, right now, I would like to give the floor to Theo, who is currently preparing his screen. Theo, are you ready?
Yeah, let's give it a try. And I'm not familiar with this app, so it's going to be very interesting. So let's do a quick sanity check here. Do you see the real-time register DNS abuse monitoring, Lars? If you could confirm.
Yes, we can see the monitor, and we are now curious to hear from you how the QPI project is working for you and how you implement it from a registrar perspective. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we've been working with the QPI program for years now. We love it, great discounts. Of course, we were familiar with it. I mean, as a Dutch registrar, the registrar scorecard from the Dutch Registry has been around for ages, I think. So that was always a very good source of getting discounts. But keeping those discounts, that is not a given in the current situation or time or frame at the moment. I mean, there's lots of stuff going on. First, we have the expansion of cybercrime. I mean, things will get a lot more worse. There will be a lot more DNS abuse. So, and DNS abuse can hit you straight out of nowhere. If you are having low levels of DNS abuse, great, but don't take that for granted, because it can change really, really quickly. And there's also the relocation of DNS abuse. And a registrar who has a high level of DNS abuse can have a million reasons to start to crack down on DNS abuse. For example, the QPI program is one. If you are a registrar with high level of DNS abuse, there's a carrot and a stick, as Brian mentioned. But what you will see is, as soon as they start focusing on the, for example, .org, and they start to clean out the cyber criminals on that TLD, then other TLDs that do not have a QPI program, those levels will go up, because those cyber criminals don't go away really quickly. They just try to find the easiest way to register domain names. So it's more likely, if the registrations for .org become more difficult or more clean, or there's more control, the registrar is a little bit more aggressive, then other TLDs will go up in DNS abuse levels. So that's a side effect of the QPI program. So I suspect at some point more and more registries will move to a QPI program, because it makes more sense. I mean, there's more growth in it, so that makes sense. But it also means that if the same registrar with high abuse levels starts sort of make all the changes on an entire platform, yes, then the DNS abuse at that registrar will go somewhere else. And it could be you. It happened to us. So how do you deal with that? There's a couple of things you can do here. First of all, make sure you are aware of how DNS abuse, how cyber criminals move along the internet. This is just a website that aggregates a lot of information from cybersecurity researchers, and there's usually a lot of information that can be found here. The question is, how do you sort of leverage this information? Because these cybersecurity researchers do great work, do a lot of research, but they don't come to you if they find out there's an issue with something. There's some kind of scam going on. There's some kind of attack going on. Those cybersecurity researchers do not contact you, but that it is useful information. Now, there is a solution for that, and it's called OTX. OTX is an open threat exchange where you can find millions and millions of indicators. And this is just one cybersecurity research company that provides a lot of information about all these kind of attacks. And it also provides information if there are domain names involved. All this information can be downloaded for free. The API usage is for free, and you don't have to set up a super complex system. Just download the information from OTX, match it with the domain names in your database, spit out a simple text result form, and you're already on your way to have your first monitoring system to detect abuse. And that is what is vital to make sure that you can keep the good discounts from QPI programs like PIR, to make sure that if you suddenly notice an increase, that you know which registrant is that, or which reseller is causing the abuse levels, so you can act on it. So this is a first step, if you will, to create your own detection monitoring system to detect DNS abuse. And again, this is for free. You don't have to pay them anything. You could though, and you get higher API usage levels. Another thing you can do, and this is more on the preventive side, is use something like block.com. We don't use this, but block.com provides you with information about IP addresses. So you can block out a lot of bad stuff. You can incorporate this into your sign-up forms, registration forms, basically anywhere on your website, and then you can filter out proxies, VPNs, complete countries. I mean, if you are a Belgium registrar, for example, or a web hosting company, and Belgium is your market, then why would you accept all that traffic from China, Russia, Cuba, or God knows where? That doesn't make any sense. And you know, and sometimes if you want to keep low levels of abuse, it is as simple as reviewing your policies and procedures. You know, if you look at the ICANN requirement for GTLDs, where the email address needs verification, a lot of registrars, you know, provide a 15-day verification period. To me, that doesn't make any sense, because to me, that is giving the cyber criminals 15 days of verification, 15 days of uptime. So with us at Realtime Register, we verify first, and then you get to use the domain name. So, and that prevents a lot of abuse. And if you ask me how much, well, it's going to depend on the cyber criminal, the type of cyber criminal you're dealing with on your platform, but it can range from 20% to 80% reduction in DNS abuse. So that's pretty massive. Also, it's good to know how much DNS abuse you have already. Now, I was going to show you DNSabusestats.com, which is from the people from IQ Global, but somehow it isn't working. But IQ Global provides abusestats.com. You simply sign up with an email address, you provide your name, servers, and an hour later you get a complete report on how bad it is or how good it is. So that gives you, you don't get all the nitty-gritty details through that report, but it gives you roughly an indication like, okay, we're good or it's bad. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, when you talk a little bit, when you're dealing with DNS abuse, you want to automate as much as you can. If you're a registrar/web hosting company, abuse.io is an open source abuse management system, which works fantastic on a web hosting level. You can incorporate feeds, you can sort of automate a lot of stuff here in your backend. It takes some time to set it up on your backend, but once you got it running, it's fantastic. And again, it's for free. And then there's DAP.live, which is a from the DNS Research Federation. I don't know the prices yet, but from what I've heard and I've seen, this is for smaller registrars who need to know more information about their domain names. And it also comes with a couple of DNS abuse feeds, so that makes it really low key and low priced to do something with all that information. And then moving on, talk about a DNS abuse monitoring system. Now, this is our system which we built a long time ago. The data goes back from 2018. It utilizes 75 reputation block lists. Do you need that many? No, you don't. That is the quick answer here. I mean, we've got some block lists that are especially focused on botnets. We haven't seen one hit from those reputation block lists since 2018. So there is obviously not always a need to have so many of them. If you want to have a complete monitoring, it does, but for the purpose of setting up a quick and dirty monitoring system to make sure you have an indication that abuse is happening, because you want to act really, really quick when DNS abuse is happening. I mean, if those guys are going to hit you, they will come with huge numbers, so you want to pick it up really quick. So every reseller or ICANN registrar who uses our backend services has access to this. They get hourly notifications. And of course, as Brian mentioned, you need to have low levels of DNS abuse to qualify for a huge chunk of the discount. Now we're looking here at the DNS abuse that we picked up since 2018 for .org. And with 8 domain names or 7 domain names, it's not much that we have DNS abuse on those levels, which is a good thing because we like to keep it low, but it's a lot of hard work. I mean, we have 2 people dedicated on it to make, and we constantly are monitoring, analyzing, investigating, and God knows what we are doing. It is a lot. Of course, this information that you have comes from several sources. If I can give you a couple of pointers, we get a lot of information from the Google Safety Browsing API, which is for free. It is about 80% of all the notifications that we get on DNS abuse comes from them. So set it up, leverage that API, match it with the, just pull the data from Google and match it with the domain names in your system. Another good example is abuse.ch, which has ThreatFox and URL House. They are mostly focused on compromised domain names, so that is a website that has been compromised. So you get a lot of information from criminal actors like Emotet and TrickBot, who sort of compromise websites as part of their business operations. This information, if you solved all the DNS abuse and you informed your customer, this information, which you see on the screen here, you can basically also utilize that to upsell other services. I mean, you already know which of your customers has been hit. If it has been a compromised domain name, it is so easy to sell something like SiteLock. A product like SiteLock could have prevented this. There's, of course, other opportunities, other products you can upsell or resell. I mean, there's tons of it out there, but you can use this information as an angle to upsell products. And if we talk about information in general, if I add Scam Advisor to the list, then we see a lot more issues. And when I talk to resellers or other registrars, I often get the sort of remark that Scam Advisor had a lot of false positives, and that is not correct. First of all, Scam Advisor doesn't tell you if it's a scam. It tells you it might be a scam, and they do that based on several metrics on information they have on the website / domain name. So when I talk to our resellers and I explain the process of how Scam Advisor ranks domain names, then it usually goes a little bit like this conversation. I mean, we scan a domain name that is supposedly to be a false positive, and then Scam Advisor says, okay, there isn't much traffic going on, so there isn't much visitors. That's an excellent opportunity to sell whatever services you have on social media, search index optimization, etc., etc. And believe me, when a customer sees his domain name on Scam Advisor, all in the red, with all these indicators, he is much more willing to use that to buy new products to make it better, to get into the green. So those search engine optimization services, that's something you can resell. Scam Advisor also knows if you have an SSL certificate. Same as with the QPI program. Is there an SSL certificate? Yes or no? That makes a difference. It makes a difference for the QPI. It makes a difference from Scam Advisor. So if there's a SSL certificate, is there no SSL certificate? Sell them an EV certificate. It's good business. Also, Scam Advisor will tell you if the website is slow. If that's a factor, then you can sell them a faster server. So on and on. This information leveraged to other opportunities. We often think as DNS abuse as a risk and a cost, and it is, but it's also an opportunity to upsell your services and make your customers aware. And that is basically how we use, or our resellers, not all of them. It's not like there's a legion of resellers that are upselling all these services based on this, but we definitely have a few who welcome the data from this program or from these feeds. So that is basically how we go about it. And of course, when our resellers, or if you as a registrar actively start using the use of these RBLs, you can actually steer into making the quality of the domain names better, which results in higher payouts from PIR, and everybody wins. So that's it from me. And I've gone through it really quickly.
Theo, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your experience with QPI and also how you monitor the abuse level on your systems and how you share this information with your resellers and partners. And this is, again, a good opportunity to open the floor for questions and comments. So if anybody from the audience would like to ask something, now is the right time to do so. I don't see any hands raised. I also don't see any questions in the questions part, which means that we maybe have pretty much covered it. But Theo, you have your hand raised.
Yes, if there are no more questions, maybe I want to share a parting shot, so to speak, that might be of interest to you. You know, at Realtime Registry, we do a lot of investigations on DNS abuse. And earlier this year, we noticed a new group from Vietnam. And I think it's pretty good to share this information with you because what is going on is pretty brutal. So let me explain what happened to us. What happened to us was we suddenly noticed a reseller that has usually 10 registrations a day went up to 500 a day. And when we looked at it, we noticed that these were old registered contacts. They were from 10 years old. So at first we thought maybe it's legit, but given the volumes, we decided to check with the reseller and ask if they were running some kind of promo or discount. And it turns out that the registrant accounts were being hacked at the reseller level. And these people, these criminals from Vietnam, they have a whole list of passwords and usernames from a lot of registrars and a lot of web hosting companies and a lot of resellers. Because as it turns out, this group is currently re-registering previous registered domain names, about 100,000 domain names a week. And I've been talking to several registrars now and other resellers, and it seems that everybody is being hit by these guys. I talked to a registrar last night. They had 200,000 registrations on their platforms. So that's a huge cost there because they ain't gonna get the money back from the registry there. So it's pretty brutal. And what these guys are doing is they're registering these domain names, put a forwarder on it, and then on an email forwarder in this case, and it just collects all the data that comes in from all these systems that keep automatically sending emails to these domain names. So that's what's been going on. And I'm sad to say that last Monday we had reseller number 10 being hit. by these guys, and they are excellent in exploiting your invoice systems, your billing systems. I've seen the most craziest stuff the last 6 months in my life, in my career, and I've been doing this a long time, and it's just absolutely crazy. I've seen them with one reseller. I've seen them register one domain name through a stolen credit card, and then the reseller would give them a promo code, and they completely abuse that promo code system, giving discounts up to 99% for every other registration. So these criminals didn't pay much at that reseller at all, but the reseller lost about 20,000 euros there in a registration. So it's a real thing, people, and I hope it doesn't happen to you, but keep an eye out. Thanks.
Thank you, Theo. We have another hand, and this is Carsten Schiefner. So I would like to give the floor to Carsten. Carsten, you should be able to speak.
I thought you guys did that. My apologies. Yeah. Once more, Carsten Schiefner from Berlin. Greetings from the German capital. So my question would go to Theo rather than to Brian. I still haven't got my head around what these guys, you spoke about Vietnamese people, what these guys are actually doing with the domain names. So just setting up websites and email services to collect like random inbound emails just doesn't fulfill a purpose yet, not on that massive scale at least. So what's the I can't get my head around what the purpose, the real purpose is. Thank you.
So these guys started out in last year, and what they were doing was re-registering all domain names, and then they put Facebook phishing on it, which was easily detectable, and they did it on a large scale also. And their sole purpose was getting Facebook credentials. Now they switched gears. Now they register the domain name. They don't put a website on it, so it looks like the domain name isn't very active until you go looking at the text records of the domain name, and then you see the forwarder service plus the Hotmail address, which collects all the data for the domain name that is being sent. And that can be a lot. I mean, I re-registered a domain name a couple of years ago. It used to belong to an antique shop. It was gone out of business like a couple of years ago. I still collect 60,000 emails a year on that catch-all email address. So that is pretty massive, because social media companies will hammer those email addresses even if the domain name hadn't been registered for years. They still blast out all these email addresses, and it's not social media. I mean, web shops, you name it. I mean, they keep on sending those automatically generated emails. So you can get a lot of data of the previous users of those domain names.
So in that instance, I mean, sending out emails to a domain name that once has been registered, was deregistered then, and then got re-registered again. So in the meantime, I would say that a lot of email bounces would go back to all those senders, but they simply do not care in that instance. They just acknowledge, or wouldn't even acknowledge the bounces, would just put them to def null, and good they are, fine they are. Is that what they do?
That is correct. You would think that GDPR would have an effect on data cleanup and accuracy of the data, but it's definitely not the case. I mean, they just blast away, even if that email address hasn't been around for a decade. They just keep going on.
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about GDPR yet, but that's a good point in particular. I mean, so I would say that all these social media companies would put themselves at some kind of a risk, at least, as in like the fees, or what is it, like up to 4% of the global turnover per year or so? That is quite massive. So yeah, but it's not my problem, I would say. Thank you, Theo.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Carsten. One more question from my end, Theo, for you would be, what advice can you give to other registrars who are interested in programs like QPI, what they should consider and what the first steps should be next to contacting Brian, of course?
You know, review all your processes, make sure that you have everything in order. Make sure that, you know, if you're a retail registrar, make sure 2FA is enabled. You know, that makes a huge difference. But also, you know, even something simple as doing an export of your domain names on a daily basis and try to see for patterns, that makes pretty good sense on our end. And we see a lot of stuff going on there. But, you know, mostly be proactive and, you know, be aggressive. Don't be too afraid to take down domain names. You gotta be careful with it and you need to do your due diligence. But if it's pretty obvious stuff like phishing from banks, you know, that is easy to detect and there's easy to do something about it. And, you know, and if you don't take it down, you risk being the next target for more and more criminals. And they will shop around. I mean, the bar will get higher and higher. There will be more QPI programs, there will be more regulations, there will be more legislation. So the bar will be higher and higher. And these guys will need their domain names. So they will go shop around. And if you haven't been hit by DNS abuse yet, you will at some point in time. That's just going to happen. It's not a question if, it's a question when.
Thank you, Theo. Brian, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, just to say, if you do have any questions about QPI, how your registrar would perform, that kind of thing, don't hesitate to reach out. But also, I really want to thank you again, Lars, but also really thank Theo. You know, hearing how QPI makes sense from the registrar perspective is even more valuable in my mind than hearing how it works from the registry side. If we had something that was great for us but bad for the registrars, it's not a system that's tenable. So thank you, Theo, as always, for all of your thoughtful approaches to DNS abuse and the QPI.
Thank you. And as Theo already mentioned, we need to also talk about evidencing abuse online, and that will be the topic for the next webinar of this series on the 13th of July, when Jeff Betzer from Clean DNS will talk about standards and frameworks of evidencing abuse online. So please take advantage of the link that you can find in the chat to register for the next one of this series right away. I don't see any more questions. I don't see any hand raised. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Theo. And we're looking forward to the next webinar of this series. And please also participate in the survey, which you will see when you close the window of this webinar, and provide feedback so that we can improve for the next time. So with this, thank you for your participation and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.